Okay, today I'm going to give you a 2013 fourth quarter forecast for what I believe will take place from now until the end of the year. And the first stop is what's on everybody's mind, and that would be Syria. And also where this U.S.-Russian deal will lead. And here's a headline from the New York Times, and it says that deal represents turn for Syria, rebels deflated. And the subheading says is the accord on chemical arms is seen as a major turning point by both sides in Syria, leaving the rebels deflated and government supporters jubilant. And as many of you know, the UN resolution that is supposedly going to hold Syria accountable to gather up their chemical weapons does not include a military response if they fail to do so. There are no real time factors involved, so this could take weeks, maybe months, and probably likely months. And it is highly unlikely that all of the chemical weapons will be accounted for. And of course, there have been reports that Syria has been moving their chemical weapon stocks around, and it's likely that much of the chemical weapons will be sent to either Lebanon, to Hezbollah, or to Iran. But even if they don't comply, there is more of a sanctions-based response that will be given instead of a military response. So this watered-down proposal is turning out to be basically a band-aid to make Russia look real good, and actually gives Mr. Obama an out in regards to responding militarily. Now, of course, he still says the military response is still on the table, but as time goes on, I believe this will probably dissipate into a situation where there can actually be no military response. I think most of the players, such as France and, of course, Britain, and most importantly, the American people will pretty much say, forget it, we don't care. So don't expect this to turn into a military response from the United States. And I have a feeling that Mr. Obama is going to try to distance himself from any type of red lines in the future regarding Syria or Iran or anyone of that nature. In fact, it's been reported that Mr. Obama has been in contact with the new Iranian president, and I foresee that they will, along with Russia, they will come to a conclusion with Iran, and there will be some type of agreement that I believe will take place. It probably likely won't be in 2013, but I do foresee the day coming when Iran will come to an agreement with both the United States and Russia regarding their nuclear program. Now, it's highly unlikely that Israel will be in agreement with this particular program or peace plan. But as I've said many times before, that the United States, Russia, and other countries, really their interests are the main things that they're most interested in. They could care less. Russia, like I said, could care less about Iran or Syria. Their only concern is cementing their position in the Middle East as a player once again. And if they have to use Syria and Iran in order to do that, they will. And that goes for the United States. They could care less about Israel, even though they call them a friend and a staunch ally. If their interests can be furthered in the Middle East with Iran or Syria, they will take that in a heartbeat. But where is this Syria war or conflict with the United States really heading? Well, as I said a couple reports ago, that really, if you think this is leading to Isaiah 17 in the immediate future, you might want to think again. And as time has proven, I certainly believe this is heading more toward Ezekiel 38 and 39. Now let me explain what I mean by that. I really believe that this showdown with Russia and the United States, and really that's what it is, it's not with Syria, it's with Russia and the United States, has proven that Russia has been able to cause the United States to back down on their attack on Syria, and at some point in time that will be the same case with Iran. And at some point when Russia brings Iran and its Islamic horde down upon Israel, that will be the same case. The U.S. and the West may balk at this war, but they will not intervene. Now, that's not to say that Isaiah 17 is not coming. It is. But I place it more in line with something that will happen during the tribulation period, somewhere probably within the confines of the apocalypse, which is found in Revelation 6, verses 3 through 8, where 1/4 of the world's population will be destroyed. And every once in a while I'll listen in on some of the other analysis that are going around on YouTube by some of the other prophecy watchers. And, a lot of them seem to be trumpeting World War III every time something takes place. When if they would just take the time to do a little good intelligence reporting, they would find out neither Russia nor Iran is going to war over Syria. And certainly not with the United States. And there's also one thing you should keep in mind. You're never going to hear threats of World War III from a reputable intelligence source unless the possibility is really there. That's why all this time that I have been reporting on the Syrian war, I've always reported that there was a very remote possibility that this could spread into a regional war, and a very, very remote possibility that it could spread to a world war situation. Many of these prophecy analysts are giving Russia and Iran way too much power, when in fact they don't even have near the power the United States possesses. Now, I'm not saying that if a war did take place that there would not be some serious ramifications for the United States, but the truth of the matter is they would not lose. I think many are giving Russia a whole lot more power than they possess. Of course, they're looking at Russia as the old Soviet Union, and they're simply not that anymore. And there's no true military analyst in the world that's going to say that they are. But one thing is for sure, when Russia does call on Israel, which the Bible says that they will, this formidable army that Russia will bring with them will be powerful enough to make the U.S. and the West blink. Now, that's not to say that if they had decided to come to Israel's rescue, they could not defeat this army. They could. But many of these nations will come to the conclusion that it's simply not worth it. But of course, we know that once the West does not come to Israel's aid, God will come to their aid. And this is when it will go from natural to supernatural. God will intervene, and it will be evident that it is from God. And he will destroy this monstrous army in the mountains of Israel, where 5/6, the Bible says that 5/6 of the army will be destroyed. And I also think that in the retaliation that this will be the time in which Israel will unleash a nuclear attack upon many of their enemy neighbors, of which Syria or Damascus will be one of them. And this will likely be the time when Damascus will be leveled. Now, many are going to say, well, what about Psalm 83? When is that unleashed? Well, frankly, I don't believe that the Psalm 83 war scenario is going to take place at this time. Now, frankly, I don't believe the Psalm 83 passage is meant for today in the first place. I think it's nothing but a prayer, but I do believe that a Psalm 83 war scenario, or Israel's neighbors will attack Israel at some point in time. In fact, that's pretty evident in Zechariah 12:3. And I also believe it's evident in Revelation, when the nations of the world will encompass Jerusalem and will attack Jerusalem. So it could happen at either one of those times at the Battle of Armageddon. But there's one thing that you need to look at, and that is when Ezekiel 38 and 39 takes place, so the war of Gog and Magog, that one of the nations that will protest is Dedan. Now, this is undoubtedly the nation of Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia is said, in fact, if you are to follow the theory brought forth by Bill Salas or one of the other guys who pushes the Psalm 83 war scenario, that Saudi Arabia will be one of the nations that will come against Israel in the Psalm 83 war scenario. And then almost immediately on the heels of the Psalm 80 war, Russia will bring back down its hordes against Israel. Well, see, that brings about a huge problem. Why in the world would Saudi Arabia protest just after they have been soundly defeated and lost some of their land, and probably some of their oil land? Because one of the theories that they're pushing with this Psalm 83 war scenario is that that Israel will not only expand their boundaries, but because of this expansion, that they will take over some of the oil lands of some of these nations, and therefore will become a richer nation in the process. Well, if that's the case, why in the world would Saudi Arabia protest Russia coming down upon Israel to take a spoil if they just lost a lot of their oil riches to Israel in a previous Psalm 83 war? That is a real big problem for me. And it should be for you as well. From time to time, I have people who email me about the post-tribulation rapture. And, they wonder why I don't believe in a post-tribulation rapture. And I keep telling them, hey, I have a huge problem with the rapture being post-tribulation because of the fact there's no one left to populate the millennium, which has to be the case. There has to be somebody left to populate the millennium. That's a major problem for post-tribulationists. And therefore, the post-tribulation rapture simply is not logical. Well, here we are with the Psalm 83 war. And then the Gog and Magog war just following. This fact that Saudi Arabia is going to protest Russia coming down upon Israel to take a spoil simply does not make sense. It's not logical, especially after a Psalm 83 war in which they've lost their land and much of their oil properties. But just as post-tribulationists blindly continue to believe that the rapture will be post-trib, even though it doesn't make any sense in the Bible whatsoever, many continue to follow this Psalm 83 scenario, even though it simply doesn't fit with a following Ezekiel 38 and 39 Gog and Magog war. It simply doesn't fit. And I would love somebody to email me or whatever the case may be and tell me how it does. I invite post-tribulationists to try to convince me of why a post-tribulation rapture makes sense, and simply no one has ever emailed me and has been able to do that. And I've given the same response regarding a Psalm 83 war. I would believe in a Psalm 83 war in a heartbeat. In fact, when I first started hearing about this Psalm 83 war, I did embrace it some respect. But the more I studied it, the more I looked into it, I said it simply doesn't make any sense and it's not logical. But if somebody can email me and point me in the right direction of how it is logical, hey, I would love to hear it. But this theory that something has to precede the Psalm 8 or the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war because so many of the nations that are Israel's neighbors are conspicuously left out can easily be explained. And I won't go into that because this video is getting a little long, but I've touched on it in other videos. It simply doesn't make any sense, and I can absolutely see why Jordan, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia are not involved. Syria, I don't believe they're going to be involved because I believe that Russia basically is going to be, that will be the touching off point for both Russia and Iran. But now let's move on to Egypt. I'll be blunt about Egypt. Basically, Egypt is old news. This will continue to be an internal struggle between the Egyptian military and the pockets of resistance that will follow in the Sinai and also throughout Egypt. But in time, I think they'll get this under control, and I simply don't see Egypt becoming a problem in the future. As I've said many times, I think that many prophecy watchers kind of jumped the gun when they said that this was Isaiah 19. I simply don't believe that's the case. But I do believe it is to come. And I do believe the fierce ruler that is prophesied will be the Antichrist. And I do believe the time will come when there will be 5 cities who will serve the Lord. But I believe that time will happen during the tribulation period and probably closer toward the millennium. But don't look for Egypt to drop the United States as a partner both militarily and financially. They will continue to rely upon the U.S. to supply them with much needed military aid and with much more needed financial aid. And as long as they remain peaceful with Israel, that will continue. And the same goes for Jordan. Don't expect Jordan to all of a sudden change their military and financial aid to Russia. Most of the prophecy world don't understand that the learning curve from going from a major military source such as the United States to even Russia brings about a monstrous change and learning curve. Countries such as Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan all rely upon continued support from the United States, and for them to just all of a sudden say, you know what, we're going from United States arms to Russian arms would be a monstrous undertaking. It would take years and possibly even decades for them to finally get to where they are now with the United States. And frankly, that's why that once Russia does come calling with its Islamic neighbors, that Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan will not be included. Now, I will admit one thing. There is one puzzle that I still haven't figured out. and that is that once Russia does come, that Turkey will also be involved, and we know that Turkey is an ally and also does have an arms agreement with the United States. So we will have to see how that puzzle gets turned around, and if indeed in time that Turkey will join Russia or maybe will back out of any arms deals in the future with the United States, because that is something that still needs to be resolved. But as has been reported in the past, Turkey has many times threatened to go into an alliance with the Baltic nations and also with Russia. And that in response to the fact that they have been trying to get into the EU for years and have not been able to. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out, because they will indeed, I believe, be a part of this alliance that will come down upon Israel. So what do I see for the future? Well, it's the same thing the Bible sees for the future, and that is the rapture of the church is the next thing I believe on God's calendar. I don't foresee this world exploding into some type of World War III scenario, which was heavily upon the news and prophecy stations all over. I don't understand where they're getting it, but there was not going to be a World War III going on. I mean, yes, it is coming, but not at this time. I still believe that we are in a pre-sudden destruction state, in which at some point in time, once the rapture takes place, we will go from a natural world to a very supernatural world. And you know, the Bible is very clear regarding the end times that people will be going about the everyday normal activities of life, marrying and giving in marriage, up until a sudden destruction. Well, when do you think this time is going to be? Well, the bottom line is sudden destruction is not the rapture of the church. At least I should say it's highly unlikely that it's considered the rapture of the church. What I believe is that once the rapture of the church takes place, and of course that will be a highly dramatic time for the world, but the world will recover. And once the Antichrist comes on the earth, I believe he will bring it back into some type of normalcy. And that normalcy will come in the form of a peace treaty that will bring peace to the whole world. In fact, it will normalize relationships with much of the world. And I believe that part of his deception will be to bring back financial stability to this world. That will be part of his deception. And as time goes on, this world will go on doing about the normal things of life, marrying and giving in marriage. And that will take place up until sudden destruction takes place. Now, what will that sudden destruction entail? Well, some of it is, or a lot of it is described in Revelation chapter 6, verses 3 through 8. And continues on up until the end of the chapter. But many today are trying to place what's going on in Revelation chapter 6 in this latest problem with Syria. Frankly, I see what's going on in Egypt and in Syria and in other parts of the world as just a continuation of wars and rumors of wars. This is not World War III, as unpopular as that may be, in the prophetic world. I feel like most in the prophetic world are trying to bring about a World War III scenario, and if it starts in the Middle East, all the better. But this is again what I see for what the future does hold. I look for the U.S. to continue its alliance with its Islamic friends in the Middle East, and I look for this latest standoff with Syria between the United States to send a very bad message to Russia, Syria, Iran, and a few others, and embolden them at some point in time in the future to attack Israel. But it likely won't take place until after Israel really, right now Israel is finding oil and lots of it. But I think there's going to come a time very soon in which which Israel will find a monstrous load of oil. So much oil that it will dwarf anything in the Middle East at that time. But as I've said, look for this Syria situation to strengthen the ties between Syria, Russia, and Iran, and to weaken their view of the United States and their response that could be possible if they were to attack Israel. Frankly put, I think they'll see the United States as nothing more than a country that bluffs. And I think that will be the catalyst that will bring about a biblical Gog and Magog war. And in closing, I just want to say what is on my heart, and that is that over 150,000 people die every single day. You may be one of them. And I know this has been a forecast for the coming months and years, but the bottom line is that you may not see tomorrow. And if that were the case, would you go to see the Lord? Because every single one of those people who die today will have their sins paid for But the problem is that many will not receive that free gift. And that means that they will die and go to hell with their sins paid for. Don't let that be you. Turn your life over to the Lord today. Accept Him as Savior. This is Terry Malone with the Calvary Prophecy Report.